Hello and welcome back to Musings from the Mountains, your old long-lost friend that is now back in action after a series of unfortunate events. We're back. I'm your host, Keenan Cummings, in case you've forgotten. I'm joined by my sidekick, Serre, also staff writer. We both work for WVSports.com with the Rivals Network, and we're going to talk some West Virginia sports, and we've got a lot to discuss. Spring football is underway. What does spring football mean? A lot of experimenting, a lot of guys in different spots, a lot of things that happen that get people excited. Sometimes there's a reason for it. Sometimes there's not. One that kind of caught my eye yesterday, I went over and kind of inquired about it, was DeVell Washington playing on the defensive side at linebacker. You don't often see wide receivers transition to linebackers, but he's not your prototypical wide receiver. I mean, he's about 6'2", 220, I'd say. Rock solid, physical wide receiver. Played some safety in high school, and thought it was interesting that I asked Neil Brown yesterday, is this a move that could stick? Because spring is all about moving guys around. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, if you watch, we've been given 2 practice sessions. Yesterday was the first time we were able to watch 11 on 11, really, and how many different guys were going in and out of the lineup, Jared. I mean, it just kept happening on the offensive line, receivers, defensive backs, defensive linemen, just keep rotating. That's what happens. But I thought it was interesting that Neil Brown said that this is a move that could stick. He thinks he has a lot of potential there, and he even intercepted a pass. What do you think about that? I mean, do you think that DeVell can help at linebacker? I mean, they're thin there.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. The lack of depth, is a big precursor to this move. And I know Neil had said that DeVell had kind of gone to the coaching staff and said, hey, I can help. You guys are thin. I can help. And so, he's big, he's quick. From what we've seen in practice, he's athletic freak, in my opinion. I mean, he played free safety in high school. Give him a shot. I think, from a media standpoint, I think everybody on the beat has all been hankering for somebody to switch positions, to have something new to write about. And, I think DeVell Washington has all the physical traits and abilities that he could succeed at that position. So I'm interested to see how it plays out, but I definitely think that it's a good choice for the West Virginia defense.
Yeah, looking at what we were able to see yesterday, some 11-on-11 work, as I mentioned, towards the end of the hour and change that we were inside the stadium. No depth chart. I tried to mention that multiple times in my observations. Take it as a depth chart. They had guys working in different spots. But I think from some of that, you can glean where some guys are working. I mean, I think I feel pretty comfortable right now saying that Letty Brown's going to be your starting running back, but he wasn't in the mix yesterday. They're trying to limit him in contact. So I thought it was interesting. I thought Jarrett Dagey, I know that's a question a lot of people have, threw the ball really well in the short to intermediate range. Ball popped off his wrist. He got it where he needed to go and was accurate with it. Deep balls, not necessarily as much. Kind of hung on him a little bit. One was a fantastic play by the DB, but he had 2 that kind of got away from him, which you'll see that at times. The one thing I was impressed with him, though, and it's been a sticking point with Neil Brown and kind of the coaching staff all offseason, he really seemed – I know he couldn't get sacked. He couldn't get hit yesterday, so it's a little different dynamic. But I thought he moved much better in the pocket, even got to the edge a couple times with throws. I don't think you saw that very much last year, really at any point. So I know it's spring. I know there's no pass rush really, but if he can get to the point where he can at least manipulate the pocket enough, this could be a much more effective, efficient offense. And I think that's what they want to see out of him. In terms of standouts, didn't really see enough to necessarily label, X guy was good, X guy was bad. But I do just looking physically at the roster, I think they've done a really good job in winter conditioning. Caden Prather looks like a player already. He has that look of a true outside wide receiver, runs well. Sean Martin is another guy that stood out to me physically. I've already mentioned James Thomas before. He looks like a truck, at linebacker, and across the roster, they're taking more of a shape that you wanted to see from really a Big 12 football conference team. I mean, they're starting to look like that, and I think that overall, there's some expectations for this team. I mean, they have to get better at quarterback. They have to get better at offensive line. They got to learn how to catch the football, and they got to replace some guys on defense. But, one thing that stood out to me on the defensive side when I was watching is Scotty Young. Just how he's able to make plays. He kind of reminded me of Tyke Smith on a play where he came backside and spilled Tony Mathis in the backfield. I think that's what you want to see out of him. Coverage is going to be the area that, is the question mark, I would say. But when it comes to run support and what he can do at that position, I think you're not going to see a major drop off there at all. Anything stand out to you that we were able to watch, Jared?
Yeah, one of the things initially going off what you said about Scotty Young is I agree 100%. Scotty Young at least fills that role so much very well, like Tyke Smith did. Based on what we've seen in practice, Scotty Young he has a knack of just getting his helmet to the ball, tracking the ball, coverage, maybe a little bit of issues. I don't think that's anything to worry about. I think, come the season, you can't forget that he spent, last season technically on the bench due to the transfer. But, I think he'll definitely provide an immediate impact in the secondary without question. And you had mentioned Jarrett Doege earlier. I kind of wanted to talk a moment about Garrett Green, what I saw from him. He's definitely an athletic freak. I have not really seen much of Garrett Green prior to this spring. I mean, he played against Eastern Kentucky, but I've never really sat down and looked at his film or anything like that. And watching him run around in practice, I mean, he's running options, he's scrambling out of the pocket, he's doing all kinds of things. He moves unafraid. And I think that's huge when respectfully you have a guy like Jarrett Doege who, at times isn't the most confident in himself. Garrett Green is, in a good way, reckless. He moves around eloquently. His kind of flaws right now, he's still kind of raw passing wise. He was yesterday at practice. He threw a bunch of deep balls that sailed out of bounds. But the skills are there, and I think with the seasoning, the future is bright for him without question.
Yeah, he was a Elite 11 quarterback for a reason. He moves really well in the pocket, probably as well as, I'd say, even better than Skylar Howard, if you really want to be honest. If you're looking at West Virginia quarterbacks, he moves effortlessly. He had a play yesterday where he got to the edge, and Andrew Wilson-Lamp met him and got a hand on him. But I wonder if that was actual football, if that wouldn't have been quite a big chunk of yardage there, just because of his athleticism. Has a very strong arm. Rocketed a pass into Caden Prather yesterday that bounced off his hands. I mean, just because he threw it so hard. Harnessing that, learning how to put some touch on the ball, learning the nuances of playing quarterback at this level. I think that the ceiling is high for him. I see why Brown is so excited about him in the future. I'm not sure if it's now yet. I mean, I think obviously they're welcome to a quarterback competition right now, but I mean, at worst, he's going to push Doege. I don't know if he's ready to start yet, but you'd like to see maybe, at least potentially, some packages for him, especially in the red zone, just with his ability to move, extend plays, and it does get him into trouble in times, as you mentioned, but at the same time, that's also kind of what makes him who he is. He's able to move the pocket, able to pick up yards, and really a really explosive athlete for a quarterback. So I'll be interested to see how that turns out. Flipping the script a little bit away from college football, college basketball, it's roster change season. And that's definitely underway at West Virginia. 2 transfers in the last week. Uncharted territory, really, over the last decade. West Virginia had added 1 transfer, in Gabe Osabuoyen since the Matt Humphrey experiment. They've added 2 graduate transfers this week. 2. Dimon Carrigan from Florida International, Malik Curry from Old Dominion. 2 pieces of the puzzle that are going to really help West Virginia. Carrigan was one of the best shot blockers in the country. West Virginia needed a rim protector this year, especially with how they play that denial, overhelp defense. They're out extended in the half court. You got to have some guy that can cover up mistakes, and he can do that. I thought it was interesting that Nuggets mentioned pressure defense, in the release on Carrigan. I know everybody immediately expects that means press. I don't know if that necessarily means that. I think he's talking more about their pressure half court defense, but at least it opens the possibility. Everybody gets excited to talk about the press. Curry, on the other hand, scoring guard is the best way to put it. A guy that can put the ball in the basket, average close to 16 points per game at Old Dominion, high usage rates. If you look at all the analytics, he's a guy that is comfortable with the ball in his hand and can score with the ball in his hand. And I thought what I thought was incredibly interesting is, you look at it on the surface, it's kind of like Bob Huggins' comment I was mentioning earlier about the press. Everybody thought if you're adding Curry, it automatically means that Deuce McBride's gone. No, it doesn't. Curry was recruited to play with the ball in his hands and try to get the ball to Deuce McBride, move him off the ball. Does that mean Deuce will come back? No, it does not. But it is not a sign he's leaving. So I think that's important to note. And West Virginia's not done yet. They still have one scholarship left and are actively recruiting more transfers. So I think it'll be interesting to see what this roster looks like. There's a lot of moving and shaking that's going to happen between now and when the season kicks off. You have 4 guys that are contemplating NBA decisions, 3 that have already declared in Taz Sherman, Sean McNeil, and of course Deuce McBride. Derek Culver's probably going to join him at some point. If he doesn't, it would kind of be, I don't understand why he wouldn't. There's no downside to it. If you had to guess, I'm putting you on the spot here. I'll do the same thing, so it's not just you. We did not prep this. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you have on the percentages? Yeah, 1 to 100 of those guys coming back, 100 being that they're back next year. What do you got for McNeil?
So for Sean, I'll start with a quick blanket statement here. I think it's really hard to evaluate individually because there are so many people who are weighing these options. I always think about back to my athletic career, in any sport, whether it was middle school or whatever, about you build a bond with a team. Nobody can refute that, and it gets to a point where those are your brothers. And if you're sitting here and all your brothers are leaving, what does that mean for you? You might think, hey, I could use a change of scenery too. I think it's time for me to go. I don't want to stick through another regime change, if you will. And so I mean, for better or worse, I wouldn't be surprised if the number of guys leaving is more than we would anticipate. I think Sean McNeil, I would say I'm the highest on him coming back, just because I think he's at a point where you don't not go through it when you have the option to come back. You don't not go through the process. Sean McNeil, he's showed flashes. He's still very much, I would say, a one-dimensional player, but I think another season here, he'll be much more well-rounded. We saw him put the ball on the ground a little bit, but he is still pretty much a shoot-first guy. Miles, I think he also comes back. I don't even really have a reason why. I feel like Miles is a smart kid. I mean, we've talked to him, and he is. I think he would acknowledge, while he is a borderline first round pick, I think another season back under Huggins and working on his game a little bit could get him into the lottery, no problem. And I honestly, I've never been in that position, but I'd much rather be a lottery pick than a fringe first rounder. Taz, I'm a little feeling a little less that he'll come back. I remember I was watching an Instagram live that he was on a couple weeks back, and somebody asked him about unfinished business, and he said his unfinished business was to simply make it to the tournament. And I think that spoke loudly, just in a sense of, okay, how much more motivation does he have to come back? If he, like, everybody wants to win a national title, but if his motivation was to just go to the tournament, then, so I think that speaks less likely. I don't think he is, I'd give him at less than 50% that he comes back. And who am I missing? I know I'm rambling here, but who's
Culver.
Culver. if you had asked me this question a year ago, I would have said that Culver would probably be the only person leaving after this season. He's older. I remember he came in with my class. I'm a junior right now, and so is he. But he had that post grad year, so I believe he's already 22. By the time, if he were to exhaust his eligibility, he'd be 23. And as we all know, that the NBA game, 23-year-old rookies don't work out all that often. Um, Regardless, I think he will declare at some point and go through the process. I I'm not really sure about him. I would put him smack dab in the middle. I think his bond with Huggins is definitely, you can't ignore it. So I don't think he would just necessarily just leave, but I can definitely see the arguments for why he would.
For me, I think Sean McNeil is the most likely to come back. I agree with you. I would put that at 85 to 90%. I think it would serve him well. A guy I've role reversed on two completely. I thought for sure Taz Sherman was gone. I thought he was gone. I don't think there was any way he was coming back. I think now I'm leaning more towards him coming back, just based off actions, based off what I've heard. I don't think it's a slam dunk. Obviously, he's going to have professional opportunities. If not in the NBA, you can make a nice chunk of change overseas, as plenty of guys have shown. I think that I'd put him 60-40 coming back now. Deuce, I'm kind of the other way. I thought for sure he would come back. But if he continues to be right on that first round borderline, you mentioned it. The NBA is not a game to wait. Yes, he could potentially come back and be a lottery pick, or he could potentially come back and not have the season or get injured. I mean, there's a lot of variables there. If you're a first round pick, if you have a first round pick grade, unfortunately for West Virginia, you almost have to take it. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. I'm more probably 45-55 of him coming back, and that is only because of recent draft projections. I think if he falls back into that second round, he will come back. You mentioned he's a smart kid. He is. Derek Culver, I'm really not sure at this point. I don't really know. I could see him coming back, and I could see him leaving. You mentioned the post-grad year. Yeah, he's going to be old for basketball standards. You got to make money when you can make money if you want to do this professionally, whether that's here or overseas. Derek has a lot to work on. If he wants to take that next step, obviously that's not very often you say about someone that was a first-team all-league player, but did not finish the season he wanted to. You could definitely see him looking at it and saying, "Hey, I'm not ready," and coming back for one more year. But I think regardless, you got one more year with all these guys, just based off the action if they do come back, and whether or not they come back really changes the dynamic of this team. You get all four of these guys back. I don't even know how you find minutes for some of these guys. You'd have to go really to a three-guard lineup almost exclusively. Put McNeil at the 3, Sherman at the 3. Put Deuce at the 2, Curry at the 1. Have a rim protector. Have 3 different bigs. Bridges at the 4. You got a lot of different options there. So West Virginia can be, I've seen a lot of these way too early preseason predictions. I've seen West Virginia slotted from top 5 to top 25, and really that's fair because right now there's so many questions to answer. But I think it will be exciting to see it start to unravel. I mean, the one thing you have to give West Virginia credit for is being proactive. Even if Deuce McBride leaves, West Virginia has a replacement in Curry. It's obviously not what you wanted. You'd like to have both those guys together, as I mentioned, play McBride off the ball, but because that's what he's going to be in the NBA. He's going to be a catch and shoot guy. That is going to be Deuce McBride's role in the NBA, and you kind of want him to showcase that he can do that. Obviously, he's shown he can do it here when given the chance, but more often than not, he had to play point. West Virginia didn't have a true point other than Jordan McCabe. So interesting. We got a lot to discuss. We'll discuss a lot more of it in the coming weeks. I expect West Virginia to add another transfer. That would fill them up with the scholarship allotment, and they could have as many as 15. If Ossaboyan and Sherman both come back, they could have 15 players on the roster. Unheard of. The limit's 13, but they've changed the rules. Flipping gears real fast, one last thing, recruiting. West Virginia's starting to pick up steam. Added a couple commitments recently. This class is starting to take shape a little bit. Quarterback is the concern many people have. You'd like to see him try to add somebody in the coming days. Braden Davis obviously is right at the top of that list. Rocco Beck, who was a target, I had spoken to him. He was kind of that next guy down the board, committed to Iowa State. Obviously, he has connections, so you never know if that's a closed book. But things are coming together on recruiting as well. 4 commitments now, could be as many as 6, 7 in the coming weeks. So we'll see what happens there, and stay tuned because it's the time for news. The offseason usually brings more news than when we're actually in season because it's a lot of moving, a lot of shaking. And the transfer portal has opened a completely new dynamic for guys exiting and entering programs. So thanks for tuning in again. This has been another edition of Musings from the Mountains. We hope to have you back soon.